The open file on my desk hasn't moved in almost 20 minutes. It probably contains one of the most important contracts Ashtec has signed this quarter. I wouldn't know. Because instead of reading it, I'm watching the Omega sitting across from me. Adrian. My 26-year-old assistant. The Omega who is carrying my twins, while believing I don't know. A small smile tugs at my lips as he types away on his laptop, completely focused on work. He's only a few days away from entering his 4th month, and the slight curve beneath his shirt is becoming harder to hide. Most people would never notice it. But I do. I notice everything about him. 5 years ago, when Ashtec was nothing more than a dream and a tiny rented office, Adrian walked into my life carrying nothing but a resume and quiet determination. He became my first assistant. Then my most trusted employee. Then, my closest friend. For 5 years, he stood beside me as I built this company from the ground up. He stayed through failed investments, impossible deadlines, sleepless nights, and every success that followed. Somewhere along the way, Ashtec became one of the country's biggest technology companies. And somewhere along the way, Adrian became the person I trusted more than anyone else. Even then, neither of us crossed the line between friendship and professionalism. At least, not until almost 4 months ago. We were attending an overseas business conference. The schedule was packed from morning until midnight. Between meetings, interviews, and investors, Adrian forgot to remind me to take my suppressants. And I forgot to take them myself. That single mistake threw me into an unexpected alpha cycle. Everything after that became a blur. I remember collapsing inside my hotel suite. I remember my instincts screaming. I remember someone wrapping me in the sweetest Omega scent I'd ever known. Warm hands. A calm voice. Gentle reassurance telling me everything would be all right. For the first time that night, my cycle stopped hurting. When I woke up the following morning, the room was empty. I thought maybe I had imagined everything. Later that day, I casually asked Adrian if he knew who had stayed with me. He simply looked confused. "I'm not sure, Rowan," he said. "It was probably someone from the hotel." I believed him. Or at least, I tried to. But that scent, that feeling, I couldn't forget it. So after returning home, I called Jack, my head of security. Find out who entered my suite that night. 2 days later, Jack walked into my office carrying the hotel's security footage. I watched the recording once. Then twice. Then a third time. Each viewing gave me the same answer. The Omega who entered my room wasn't a hotel employee. It wasn't a stranger. It was Adrian. I don't think I've ever been that shocked. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Adrian had been the one who stayed with me. The one who soothed my cycle. The one whose scent I couldn't forget. I closed the tablet and looked at Jack. "You didn't see anything." Jack frowned. "Sir? This stays between us." He understood immediately. "No one tells Adrian." "No one," I repeated. "If he doesn't want me to know, then I'll respect that." Life returned to normal. Or at least, that's what Adrian believed. Then, almost a month ago, Jack knocked on my office door again. His expression alone told me something was wrong. "Sir? What is it?" I confirmed the medical report. I frowned. "What report?" Jack placed a file in front of me. "Mr. Adrian is pregnant." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Pregnant. I slowly opened the report. Then I saw another word. Twins. Jack continued quietly. "The timeline matches the overseas trip. There is no doubt. The babies are yours." I expected to feel anger, betrayal, confusion. Instead, all I felt was fear. Not fear of becoming a father. Fear that Adrian had been carrying our pups alone. A pregnant Omega should never have to face this journey without their alpha. Every instinct inside me wanted to walk across this office, pull Adrian into my arms, scent him, and promise that neither he nor our pups would ever have to worry again. But I couldn't. If Adrian had chosen not to tell me, then he had his reasons. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he didn't want anything from me. Maybe he thought I would reject him. Whatever the reason, I refused to force my way into his decision. So I chose silence. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Since then, I've quietly reduced his workload. I make excuses to cancel unnecessary meetings. I make sure he never skips a meal. Whenever he looks tired, I send him home early. Every doctor's appointment somehow ends up fitting perfectly into his work schedule. He probably thinks all of it is coincidence. It isn't. Most days, I accomplish almost nothing. The contracts pile up. Emails go unanswered. Because every few minutes, I find myself looking at Adrian instead. Watching him unconsciously cradle the tiny swell of his stomach. Watching the Omega carrying the two most precious people in my life. At first, Adrian accepted it without question. But eventually, He couldn't ignore it anymore. One afternoon, after the rest of the staff had left for a meeting, he stood in front of my desk with his arms folded. His amber eyes were fixed on me. "Rowan." I looked up from the report I wasn't actually reading. Can I ask you something?" "Always." He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Why are you taking such good care of me?" I remained silent. He continued before I could answer. "You've reduced my workload. You won't let me carry heavy files. You keep ordering meals whenever I forget to eat. You even changed my schedule." A small, confused smile appeared on his face. "I'm grateful. I really am. But I don't understand. Why me?" For one dangerous second, I almost told him everything. That I knew he was carrying my pups. That every alpha instinct inside me screamed to protect my pregnant Omega. That I spent more time worrying about him than running a billion-dollar company. Instead, I forced myself to smile. "You've gotten too thin." Adrian blinked. "That's your reason?" "You've been working too much. I'd rather have a healthy assistant than an overworked one." He stared at me for another few seconds before letting out a quiet laugh. "You're strange sometimes." "Maybe." Still, his smile softened. "Thank you." He never asked again. And somehow, that made me feel even worse. Nearly 2 weeks later, I knew something was wrong the moment Adrian stepped out of the elevator. His scent had changed. Not the sweet, comforting Omega scent I had grown accustomed to over the past 5 years. It carried exhaustion, stress, and beneath it, a faint trace of distress that immediately put every protective instinct inside me on high alert. His complexion was pale. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. Even walking across the office seemed to take effort. Every few minutes he paused, taking slow, careful breaths as though simply standing had become difficult. I watched him from my office without saying a word. By lunchtime, my concern had turned into fear. The cafeteria had prepared one of Adrian's favorite meals. Normally he finished every bite. Today, he managed only a few mouthfuls before quietly setting the fork down. He pressed a hand against his stomach and closed his eyes. That was enough. I walked out of my office. "Adrian." He immediately looked up. "Yes? We're leaving." He frowned. "What?" "I'm taking you home." "I'm fine." "No. I still have reports. They can wait." He studied my face for a moment. Perhaps he realized arguing would accomplish nothing. Without another word, he quietly gathered his belongings and followed me downstairs. Giving Adrian a ride home wasn't unusual anymore. Ever since I learned about the pregnancy, I'd found countless excuses to drive him myself. Today, however, something felt different. The drive had barely begun when I noticed Adrian leaning heavily against the passenger seat. His breathing was uneven. Every inhale sounded just a little harder than the last. I glanced toward him. His hand was resting protectively over his stomach. His fingers trembled. "Adrian." Look at me." He slowly opened his eyes. They were dull with exhaustion. "I'm okay," he whispered. It was the weakest lie I'd ever heard him tell. Without another word, I changed lanes and headed toward the nearest hospital. A few moments later, Adrian noticed the route. "Rowan? We're almost there." His expression immediately changed. "No." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Please don't. You need a doctor." "I just need sleep." "Please. They'll ask questions." "I don't care." "I do." His breathing became shaky. "Rowan, please." For the first time in years, I heard genuine fear in his voice. But my fear was even greater. "I'm not taking that risk." He closed his eyes. Several long moments passed before he finally spoke again. "Then I should tell you." His voice cracked. "I'm pregnant." I kept my eyes on the road. With twins. My heart clenched so painfully I thought he might hear it. It happened after a one-night stand. The alpha doesn't know. And, he's not involved. Every word hurt. Not because I doubted him. Because I knew every word was spoken out of fear, not deception. After a long silence, I asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked down at his hands. For a long time, he said nothing. When he finally answered, his voice was barely audible. "I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Losing everything." He swallowed hard. "I worked too hard to get this job. I couldn't risk people looking at me differently. I couldn't risk losing my place at Ashtec. So, I decided I'd handle everything alone." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Handle everything alone. Those words shattered something inside me. The doctors admitted Adrian immediately. After what felt like hours, one of them finally walked into the waiting area. "Mr. Ashford?" I stood before he had finished speaking. "How is he?" The doctor's expression remained professional. Mr. Adrian is physically exhausted. His blood pressure is low, and he isn't getting enough rest or nutrition. He glanced at the chart in his hands. A twin pregnancy demands much more from the body. If he continues pushing himself this way, both he and the babies could face serious complications. My chest tightened. What does he need? Complete bed rest for now. Proper meals. Regular monitoring. The doctor paused before adding, and he shouldn't be facing this pregnancy without reliable support. I looked through the glass window into Adrian's room. He lay asleep, one hand resting over the small curve of his stomach. He looked so tired. So fragile. In that moment, I didn't think about Ashtec. I didn't think about shareholders. I didn't think about meetings or contracts. There was only one thought left in my mind. No matter what it took, I would make sure Adrian and our pups never had to face another day alone. That evening, after Adrian had been discharged from the hospital with strict instructions to rest, I drove him back to his apartment. Neither of us spoke much during the drive. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy. Filled with everything we wanted to say but couldn't. When we finally arrived, Adrian reached for the door handle. "Thank you for today, Rowan." I stopped him before he could get out. "You're not staying here." He looked at me in confusion. "What? You're coming home with me?" His eyes widened immediately. "No. I'll be fine." "No, Adrian. I don't want to trouble you." "You're not." He shook his head. "I can take care of myself." I turned toward him and spoke as calmly as I could. "The doctor said you need bed rest." "I know. You need someone looking after you." "I'll manage." "No." The word came out firmer than I intended. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I softened my voice. "Adrian. I'm asking you as your friend." His eyes slowly met mine. "Your alpha isn't involved. So let me take care of you. You shouldn't have to go through this alone." The moment those words left my mouth, I saw something change in his expression. His eyes immediately dropped to his lap. His fingers tightened around the hospital discharge papers. For a brief second, it looked like he wanted to tell me something. His lips parted, then closed again. "Okay," he whispered. "If you're sure." "I'm sure." An hour later, Adrian had moved into my penthouse. Seeing his small overnight bag sitting in my guest room made the enormous apartment feel strangely warm. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe. And judging by the relieved look that occasionally crossed Adrian's face whenever he thought I wasn't looking, he felt safer too. That alone made every decision worthwhile. While Adrian rested on the sofa, I walked into the kitchen. Cooking wasn't something I did often anymore. Running Ashtec left little time for it. But tonight, I wanted to make something myself. A warm bowl of chicken and vegetable soup. Fresh rice. Steamed vegetables. Everything the doctor had recommended. When I carried the tray into the living room, Adrian stared at me in surprise. "You made this?" I smiled. I couldn't exactly order hospital food. A small laugh escaped him. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen all day. Watching him eat until the bowl was empty made something inside me finally relax. After dinner, I prepared the guest room myself. I changed the sheets. Adjusted the room temperature. Placed a glass of water and his medication on the bedside table. When Adrian finally lay down, exhaustion was written all over his face. I pulled the blanket over him. "You should sleep." "Thank you, Rowan." I nodded. Instead of leaving, I pulled a chair beside the bed and sat quietly. Within minutes, Adrian's breathing became slow and even. He had fallen asleep. Only then did I allow myself to truly look at him. His hand rested protectively over the gentle swell of his stomach. My gaze lingered there. A lump formed in my throat. I wanted so badly to reach out and tell him everything. Instead, I simply sat beside him until dawn, making sure he slept peacefully. The following morning, I found Adrian dressed neatly in one of his work suits. He was standing near the front door with his laptop bag over one shoulder. I frowned. "What are you doing?" He blinked. "Getting ready for work." "No." He looked at me as though I'd lost my mind. "Rowan, I only need a few days. You need bed rest." "I can work from your office." "No." "I'll answer emails." "No." "I'll at least attend the board meeting." "Absolutely not." He sighed in defeat. "I can't just stop working." I walked over until I was standing directly in front of him. Without thinking, I rested my hand gently against the small curve of his stomach. The gesture was so natural that neither of us moved for a moment. "You're my friend," I said quietly. "And you and your babies are my responsibility while you're under my roof. You don't have to do anything except rest until they're healthy." Adrian looked down at my hand resting over his stomach. His eyes softened. "Rowan." He didn't finish the sentence. Neither did I. Inside my heart, where no one else could hear. I smiled. Hello, little ones. Daddy's here. I'll protect all three of you. No matter how long I had to wait. I would never let anything happen to my family again. From that day onward, taking care of Adrian quietly became part of my everyday life. No matter how demanding Ashtec became. No matter how many meetings filled my schedule. My first thought every morning and my last thought every night was always the same. Had Adrian eaten? Was he resting enough? Were the babies doing well? Every evening, I left the office earlier than I ever had before. On some nights, I cooked dinner myself. Warm soups. Light meals. Fresh vegetables and grilled fish, anything the doctor recommended for a pregnant omega-carrying twins. On the nights I knew Adrian wasn't in the mood for homemade food, I would stop by his favorite restaurant on the way home and bring back the dishes he loved. His eyes always widened a little whenever he saw the familiar takeout boxes. You remembered? Of course. A small smile would appear on his face every time. Some nights, he ate everything. Watching him finish an entire meal always filled me with quiet relief. Other nights, the pregnancy was simply too hard on him. He would take a few bites, force himself to swallow, then slowly put the chopsticks down. I'm sorry. I really tried. Hearing those words always broke my heart. You don't have to apologize. I would gently slide the plate away before handing him a glass of water. You already tried your best. If you get hungry later, I'll make you something else. He would nod quietly. Sometimes, I caught Adrian looking at me. Not for a few seconds. For several long moments. His beautiful amber eyes would remain fixed on me with an expression I couldn't understand. There was longing in them. Confusion. And something else. Something that made my heart race. More than once, I caught him staring while I was reading documents or making coffee. When I finally looked back at him, he would quickly lower his gaze. One evening, I couldn't pretend not to notice anymore. What is it? He blinked. You've been looking at me. If there's something you want to say, you can tell me. For a brief moment. It looked as though he actually would. His lips parted. His fingers tightened around the mug in his hands. His eyes searched mine. Then, he smiled faintly and shook his head. It's nothing. I'm just tired. That answer disappointed me more than I cared to admit. I wanted him to trust me. I wanted him to tell me everything. But I had promised myself I would wait until he was ready. So, I never revealed that I already knew the truth. Most evenings ended the same way. After dinner, Adrian would curl up on the couch with a blanket and either read a book or watch television. More often than not, he fell asleep halfway through. The apartment would become completely silent. I found myself standing beside the couch, simply watching him sleep. The stress that constantly shadowed his face disappeared whenever he slept. He looked peaceful. Safe. My gaze would slowly drift to the gentle curve beneath the blanket. Our pups. Unable to resist, I would carefully kneel beside him. Very gently, I rested my palm against the small swell of his stomach. The warmth beneath my hand made my chest tighten every single time. Hello, little ones. I smiled to myself. Daddy's here. Keep growing strong. I'll protect all three of you. One evening, just as I was about to pull my hand away, Adrian stirred. My heart nearly stopped. His eyelashes fluttered before his eyes slowly opened. For a second, neither of us moved. He looked down at my hand resting on his stomach. Then he looked up at me. I quickly withdrew my hand and cleared my throat. You looked uncomfortable. I was just making sure the blanket hadn't slipped. The excuse sounded weak even to my own ears. Adrian didn't say anything. He simply continued looking at me. Neither of us spoke. The room became so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. His amber eyes searched mine. Mine refused to look away. It felt as though we were both standing on the edge of a truth neither of us was brave enough to speak. Several long moments passed before Adrian finally looked down, gently pulling the blanket a little higher over his stomach. Thank you, he whispered. I simply nodded. Neither of us mentioned what had happened. But from that night onward, neither of us could pretend that the distance between us still felt the same. By the time Adrian entered his 6th month of pregnancy, life had settled into a rhythm neither of us ever spoke about. Every morning, we shared breakfast before I left for Ashtec. Every afternoon, I called home between meetings just to make sure he had eaten and taken his vitamins. Every evening, I hurried back to the penthouse, knowing Adrian would already be waiting with a quiet smile and a simple, welcome home. Some nights we watched movies. Some nights we simply sat together in comfortable silence. Without realizing it, the penthouse no longer felt like a house. It felt like home. Adrian rarely returned to the office anymore. The doctors had made it clear that carrying alpha twins demanded far more from an omega's body than a normal pregnancy. Rest wasn't optional. It was necessary. Even so, Ashtec employees couldn't help but notice Adrian's absence. Whenever I walked through the executive floor, I occasionally caught whispers that stopped the moment I appeared. I haven't seen Mr. Adrian in months. I heard the CEO personally approved an extended leave. Is he seriously ill? I don't know, but Mr. Ashford has been leaving work early every single day. No one dared ask me directly. No one dared gossip loudly. Adrian had earned everyone's respect over the past 5 years, and I had made it very clear that his privacy wasn't anyone else's business. Eventually, people stopped asking. But I never stopped worrying. One night, long after midnight, I suddenly woke up. The digital clock beside my bed read 2:17 a.m. For some reason, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in my chest. Without thinking, I climbed out of bed. Checking on Adrian had become a habit. Usually, I would quietly open his bedroom door, make sure he was sleeping comfortably, adjust the blanket if it had slipped, and leave before he noticed. But tonight, as I stepped into the hallway, I saw a faint light spilling from beneath his bedroom door. It was slightly open. I frowned. He's still awake? Just as I was about to knock, a quiet voice drifted into the hallway. Adrian. He was on the phone. His voice was so soft that I almost couldn't hear him. I should have walked away. Instead, my feet refused to move. I'm leaving. His words were barely louder than a whisper. As soon as the babies are born. My heart skipped a beat. The apartment fell silent for several seconds. When Adrian spoke again, his voice broke, as though he was trying desperately not to cry. I won't let anyone take my babies. I promise. I won't tell him anything. Another pause. Then came the sentence that shattered whatever peace I'd been holding on to. Just, please make sure everything is ready. I want to leave quietly. I don't want him to know. I felt every drop of blood drain from my face. Leave? Leave, with the twins? I stood frozen outside the door, unable to process what I had just heard. My alpha instincts roared to life. Leave? Why would Adrian leave? Who is he talking to? Who wants to take the babies? A cold fear settled deep inside my chest. Those are my pups. No one is taking them. No one is taking Adrian either. My hands curled into fists without me realizing it. Then, another thought slowly crept into my mind. One I desperately wished had never appeared. What if I was wrong? The thought struck like a knife. Adrian had never once looked me in the eye and said I was the father. He had only told me. It was a one-night stand. The alpha isn't involved. Back then, I never questioned it. Jack's investigation. The hotel footage. The timeline. Everything pointed to me. But now, hearing Adrian say he wouldn't tell him anything. Who was him? Who was he protecting? Who was waiting for him after the twins were born? Was there another alpha? Someone Adrian had chosen instead? Someone he planned to disappear with? Every possibility tore at me until I could barely breathe. I wanted to burst into the room. I wanted to ask him who he had been talking to. I wanted to ask him why he was planning to leave. I wanted to ask him if I'd imagined every quiet smile we'd shared over the past 6 months. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I confronted him now, I'd only be acting on fear. And fear had a way of destroying the very people we were trying to protect. I forced myself to step away from the doorway. Each step back to my bedroom felt heavier than the last. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat alone in the darkness, replaying Adrian's words over and over again. I won't let anyone take my babies. I won't tell him anything. By the time the sun rose over the city, I had made my decision. Before I asked Adrian a single question, before I let my heart believe the worst, I was going to uncover the truth myself. No matter what it took. The next morning, I arrived at Ashtec earlier than usual. For the first time in years, I couldn't bring myself to begin working. The memories of Adrian's phone call echoed through my mind over and over again. I'm leaving as soon as the babies are born. I won't let anyone take my babies. I promise. I won't tell him anything. Every word felt like a weight crushing my chest. A few minutes later, there was a knock on my office door. Come in. Jack stepped inside. He immediately noticed the dark circles beneath my eyes. You didn't sleep. No. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the city below. I need you to investigate something. Jack waited silently. I want every detail. I don't want assumptions. I want facts. He nodded. What exactly do you need? I turned to face him. I want to know who Adrian was talking to last night. I want to know why he's planning to leave. I want to know where he plans to go. My voice faltered before I forced out the next sentence. And I want absolute proof that those twins are mine. The words tasted bitter. For months, I had never doubted it. Now, a single conversation had managed to shake every certainty I had. Jack looked at me for a long moment before answering. I'll find out. But it won't happen overnight. Give me a few days. I'll uncover everything. I nodded slowly. You have all the time you need. But don't miss anything. I need the complete truth. You'll have it. Jack left without another word. The following days were torture. Outwardly, nothing changed. I still woke up early to prepare Adrian's breakfast. I still reminded him to take his supplements. I still drove him to every doctor's appointment. I still cooked dinner every evening. Anyone looking at us would have thought everything was perfectly normal. Only I knew otherwise. The fear inside me grew heavier with each passing day. Whenever Adrian smiled, I wondered if he was secretly counting down the days until he left. Whenever he folded tiny baby clothes, I wondered if he imagined another home, another country, a life without me. Sometimes, I caught myself staring at his stomach far longer than I realized. My pups. Were they truly mine? Or had I convinced myself of something that wasn't real? I hated myself every time that thought appeared. Then I remembered the hotel footage. The timeline. Jack's earlier investigation. Nothing made sense anymore. My uncertainty began affecting my behavior. I smiled less. I spoke less. I often disappeared into my office for hours, pretending to work while the same questions circled endlessly in my mind. Adrian noticed. One evening, while we were having dinner, he quietly set down his spoon. Rowan? You've been different lately. I forced a smile. Have I? He nodded. You seem worried. Did something happen at the company? I looked into his eyes. For one reckless second, I wanted to tell him everything. Instead, I simply shook my head. It's just work. He didn't seem convinced. But he didn't press me. The guilt nearly consumed me. Exactly 1 week later, Jack returned. This time, he carried a thick folder. He placed it gently on my desk. I have everything. I looked at the file but didn't open it. Tell me. Jack took a slow breath. The person Adrian spoke to that night was his mother. I blinked. His mother? Yes. She has been living in the United States for several years. The phone records confirm it. The tightness in my chest eased slightly. Jack continued. I also completed another paternity investigation. There isn't any uncertainty. The twins are yours. For the first time in a week, I breathed normally. Relief flooded through me so suddenly that I had to grip the edge of my desk. My children. They really were mine. Then Jack opened another section of the file. There is more. My expression hardened. What is it? Adrian has been planning to leave the country. I felt my heart sink again. He began making preparations shortly after entering his 4th month of pregnancy. Jack handed me several printed emails. These are conversations between Adrian and his mother. They discussed housing, medical care, immigration paperwork. He intended to move to the United States immediately after giving birth. I slowly lowered the papers. So, he really was leaving. Jack nodded. Yes. But he originally intended to leave much earlier. I looked up. What changed? He couldn't. The pregnancy became physically demanding. The doctors advised him that carrying alpha twins required stability, regular care, and minimal stress. Jack paused. He believed staying near his alpha, whether you knew about the pregnancy or not, gave the babies the best chance to grow safely. So he postponed everything. He planned to leave only after the twins were born. I closed my eyes. A painful ache spread through my chest. Even now, Adrian was putting our pups before himself. He wasn't staying because he wanted to. He was staying because he believed it was what the babies needed. I finally understood why he had looked at me so many times. Why he always seemed as though he wanted to say something before stopping himself. How lonely he must have felt. Living under the same roof as the alpha he loved while believing he had to leave him forever. I looked at Jack. I'm done. Sir? I'm done pretending. I should have told him the truth months ago. I won't force him to stay. I won't pressure him into accepting me. But he deserves to know that he isn't alone. I smiled sadly. He deserves to know that I've loved our pups long before I ever saw their ultrasound. And my voice became almost a whisper. He deserves to know that I love him too. I don't want him to leave. I don't want to lose my family before I've even had the chance to become one. Jack gave me a small nod. Then tell him. I will. I grabbed my keys and headed toward the elevator. I was finally going to tell Adrian everything. Every secret. Every fear. Every feeling I had buried for months. But fate had other plans. Just as I reached the parking garage, my phone rang. It was the housekeeper. The moment I answered, I heard panic. "Mr. Ashford. Please come quickly." "What happened?" "It's Mr. Adrian. He slipped in the bathroom. He fell." My heart stopped beating. "Is he conscious?" "They've already called an ambulance. They're taking him to the hospital now." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Without another word, I sprinted toward my car. My mind was completely blank. There was only one prayer repeating inside my heart. "Please, don't let anything happen to Adrian. Please protect our pups. Just let me reach them in time." Hey everyone! Before we continue, this is the censored version of the story to comply with YouTube's community guidelines. If you'd like to hear the extended, uncensored audiobook, simply use the QR code on the screen or the link in my channel description to visit my Patreon page. Thank you for your support, and enjoy the story. By the time I reached the hospital, my heart was pounding so violently that I could hear it over everything else. I barely remembered parking the car. I barely remembered running through the emergency entrance. All I remembered was praying. Please, please let Adrian be safe. Please let our pups be safe. When I pushed open the hospital room door, I froze. Adrian lay quietly on the bed, and four connected to his arm. His face was unnaturally pale, and the exhaustion written across his features made him look heartbreakingly fragile. Seeing him like that, something inside me shattered. For months, I had promised myself that I would protect him, that I would never let anything happen to him. Yet here he was, lying in a hospital bed because I hadn't been there when he needed me. I walked to his bedside on trembling legs. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. I tried to hold back the tears burning behind my eyes. I couldn't. A tear escaped before I could wipe it away. Then another. I quickly turned my face, ashamed of losing control. "Rowan?" I looked back. Adrian was awake. The moment our eyes met, his own composure crumbled. His lips trembled. His eyes instantly filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I immediately shook my head. "No. You have nothing to apologize for." His voice was weak. "I scared you." I reached for his hand without thinking. "You don't ever have to apologize for that." To my surprise, Adrian squeezed my fingers gently. Then, despite being the one lying in the hospital bed, he was the one comforting me. "I'm all right." He offered me a small smile. "The babies are strong. So am I. Everything will be all right." Those words only made my chest tighten even more. A few minutes later, the doctor entered the room carrying Adrian's latest examination results. "The good news," the doctor began, "is that both babies are doing well." I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They weren't harmed by the fall. Relief flooded through me. But the doctor's expression remained serious. "However, Mr. Adrian's body is under considerable strain. A twin pregnancy places tremendous demands on an omega. He needs more rest than before. Proper nutrition. Regular monitoring. And above all," the doctor looked directly at me, "he must avoid unnecessary physical and emotional stress. At this stage, even severe emotional shock can negatively affect both the omega and the pregnancy. If there is anything stressful that can wait, my advice is to wait." I nodded quietly. Every word echoed painfully inside my mind. The truth. The conversation I had planned. The confession I'd rehearsed countless times. How could I tell him now? If hearing everything overwhelmed him? If it placed him under even more stress? What if something happened to him? What if something happened to our pups? No. I couldn't risk it. Not now. That evening, after the doctors finally allowed Adrian to return home, I stayed beside him every step of the way. After dinner, I helped him back to his room. I adjusted his pillows. Made sure he had taken every medication. Pulled the blanket carefully over him. Just as I was about to switch off the bedside lamp, Adrian spoke. "Rowan." I looked back. "Yes?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched me. His amber eyes searched my face as though they were looking for something they had missed all this time. Finally, he asked quietly, "You know everything, don't you?" My entire body went still. For the briefest moment, I forgot how to breathe. Then I forced myself to remain calm. "I don't know what you mean." Adrian let out a quiet, bittersweet laugh. "You still won't admit it." He lowered his eyes. "What an idiot I've been. I thought I could hide everything. I thought you didn't know." He smiled sadly. "After everything you've done for me, bringing me here, cooking for me, taking care of me every single day, I still convinced myself you were only being kind." His voice cracked. My own eyes began to sting again. I took a slow breath. Adrian, I really don't know what you're talking about. He slowly shook his head. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Then, he lifted his eyes to meet mine. Look at me, Rowan. I did. For several long moments. Neither of us looked away. Tears quietly gathered in both our eyes. Finally, I spoke. If there really is something you want me to know, please, tell me yourself. I want to hear it from you. Adrian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was no hesitation left. I fell in love with you a long time ago. The confession was almost a whisper. I never planned to. It just happened. He laughed weakly through his tears. You always looked so untouchable. So professional. So focused on work. And I remember hearing you talk about the future. You once said you wanted to get married someday. You talked about having a family. I convinced myself that family would never include me. So I buried my feelings. His tears finally spilled over. Then, during the overseas trip, he looked down at his hands. When your cycle came, you wouldn't let go of me. Afterward, when everything was over, I couldn't tell you. I was terrified. When I discovered I was pregnant, I wanted to tell you the truth so many times. So many, but every time I gathered the courage, my fear won. He pressed a trembling hand over his stomach. I kept imagining the worst. I thought if I told you, everything would change. I thought I might lose my babies. His voice broke completely. So I decided to leave. I started making plans. I thought if I disappeared after they were born, they would be safe. He looked at me through tear-filled eyes. I know you'll probably hate me for saying this, but I couldn't bear the thought of anyone taking them away from me. They're my whole world. So, I decided, I wouldn't let you take them. The room fell silent. I could see it now. Not a man trying to keep me away from my children, but an Omega who had spent months living with fear, believing he had to choose between the Alpha he loved and the children he already loved more than his own life. And that realization hurt more than anything I'd ever experienced. Silence filled the room. Neither of us spoke. Adrian sat quietly against the pillows, his eyes lowered, tears slipping down his cheeks one after another. Watching him cry, watching the Omega I had loved for years carry all that fear alone. It broke me. Slowly, I stood from my chair and walked to the side of his bed. Can I? I asked softly, gesturing toward him. Adrian gave the smallest nod. Carefully, making sure not to disturb his belly, I slipped an arm around his back and helped him sit up more comfortably against the headboard. Once he was settled, I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders brushed. For a few moments, I simply held his hand. Then I looked into his tear-filled eyes. Adrian. My voice trembled. Did you really believe that I could ever take our babies away from the person who carried them for months? The person who's risked his own life to bring them into this world? Adrian didn't answer. He simply stared at our joined hands. After what felt like forever, he whispered. I was scared. His voice was barely audible. I've seen it happen before. I've heard stories. Children being separated from one parent. People with power getting what they wanted. I kept thinking, if one day you decided you wanted them, what chance would I have? His shoulders shook. I know you aren't a bad person. But fear doesn't let you think clearly. I couldn't lose them, Rowan. I just couldn't. They became my whole world the moment I learned they were growing inside me. My chest tightened painfully. Without thinking, I reached up and gently wiped away the tears on his face. You've been carrying this fear all by yourself. I whispered. He nodded. I'm sorry. I shook my head immediately. No. You don't owe me an apology. If anyone should be apologizing, it's me. Adrian looked up, confused. Taking a slow breath, I finally said the words I'd kept hidden for months. I've known from the beginning. His eyes widened. What? I found out after the overseas trip. I couldn't forget that night. So I asked Jack to investigate. When he showed me the hotel footage, I knew it was you. His lips parted, but no words came out. I also found out about the pregnancy long before you ever told me. Adrian stared at me in complete disbelief. You knew all this time? I nodded. I did. Then, his voice cracked. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to respect your choice. You had your reasons for keeping it a secret. I didn't want to force the truth out of you. I wanted you to tell me when you were ready. I smiled sadly. But every single day, it became harder to pretend. I watched you struggle with morning sickness. I watched you fall asleep on the couch because you were too exhausted to make it to your room. I watched our babies grow. And every day, I fell a little more in love with all three of you. Fresh tears rolled down Adrian's cheeks. I gently cupped his face with both of my hands. His skin was warm beneath my palms. Slowly, I rested my forehead against his. So many years. I convinced myself that keeping things professional was the right thing to do. I thought work came first. I thought there would always be time later. A soft laugh escaped me. I was wrong. My heart had already chosen long ago. It chose you. I looked into his beautiful amber eyes. You said you admired me. The truth is, I've admired you for years. Your kindness. Your strength. The way you put everyone else before yourself. The way you've loved our babies from the very first day. A smile slowly appeared through my tears. I used to think the family I dreamed of didn't exist yet. But I was wrong. I already found it. I found it in you. And in the two little miracles growing inside your belly. My thumbs gently brushed away the tears on his cheeks. I love our babies. But, I smiled softly. I don't just want them. I want you too. I don't want a future where you're only the parent of my children. I want a future where you're my partner. My home. My family. I took a shaky breath before asking the question that had lived inside my heart for months. So, will you stay? Not because of the babies. Not because you feel responsible. But because you want to build this life with me. For several seconds, Adrian couldn't speak. He simply stared at me as tears continued falling from his eyes. Then, he nodded. Once. Twice. Before finally whispering, I'll stay. His voice broke into a sob. I'll stay, Rowan. The words were barely out before I carefully wrapped my arms around him. Mindful of his pregnant belly, I held him as gently as I could. Adrian buried his face against my shoulder, crying with months of fear, loneliness, and relief pouring out all at once. I closed my eyes and held him tighter. One hand rested protectively against his back. The other found its way to the gentle curve of his belly. Our babies. Our family. For the first time in a very long time, neither of us was afraid anymore. From that day onward, everything changed. There were no more secrets between us. No more pretending. No more silent fears. Only the two of us, waiting for the day our little family would finally become complete. Naturally, Ashtec became less important. I still went to the office whenever something required my attention, but I delegated almost everything to the board and my executives. Meetings became shorter. Business trips were cancelled. Half of my workload found its way onto someone else's desk. Nothing mattered more than Adrian. Most days, I worked from home. If I wasn't answering emails, I was with him. Since he had moved into my bedroom, taking care of him became part of my daily routine. I made sure he ate on time, helped him with his medicine, and never let him lift anything heavy. As Adrian entered his 7th month of pregnancy, things became much harder. His belly had grown beautifully round with our twins, and his body was changing every day. His chest had become noticeably fuller, making some of his old clothes uncomfortable to wear. His back constantly ached. His feet often swelled by the end of the day. And sleeping through the night became almost impossible. Many nights, I woke to find him sitting on the bed, breathing through the discomfort while gently holding his belly. Seeing him in pain made my heart ache. I couldn't understand how anyone could ever think of taking babies away from the person who endured so much to bring them into the world. Whenever the discomfort became too much, I would hold him close, gently rub his back, or massage his belly until he relaxed. One night, after the twins had been kicking him for nearly an hour, Adrian let out an exhausted sigh. I'm never doing this again. He looked down at his belly and added, these two are enough. I couldn't help smiling. Leaning over, I kissed his forehead. As you wish. That earned me a tired but genuine smile. Every morning, I helped him into comfortable clothes because bending had become difficult. Every night, before we fell asleep, my hand always found its way to his belly. I would gently rub it while talking to our twins. Be nice to your papa, I would whisper with a smile. He's already doing so much for both of you. Almost every time, one of them would kick against my palm. And somehow, that tiny kick always made both of us smile. The weeks passed quickly. One evening, I finally gathered enough courage to tell my family the truth. About Adrian. About the twins. About everything. For a few seconds, no one said a word. Then my mother's eyes filled with tears. You've been carrying all of this by yourself? I nodded. A smile slowly spread across her face before she walked over and hugged me tightly. You finally found your family. My father smiled proudly while my younger sister excitedly started asking when she could meet her nephews. The house was filled with laughter that night. For the first time, I truly felt like everything was falling into place. The news reached Ashtec not long after. No one was shocked. In fact, most employees simply laughed. I knew something was going on. I'd been saying that for years. Didn't you see how the CEO looked at Mr. Adrian? I thought they were secretly dating already. I guess we were right after all. Instead of gossip, everyone congratulated us. It felt surprisingly warm. By the time Adrian entered his 8th month of pregnancy, things became much more difficult. Even walking from the bedroom to the living room left him exhausted. His body had become weaker, while his belly seemed to grow bigger every day. During one of our regular checkups, the doctor carefully reviewed every report before looking at us. The twins are doing very well. They're healthy and developing perfectly. I smiled in relief. Then the doctor's expression became serious. But Adrian's body is under a great deal of strain. He's becoming weaker. If we continue waiting until full term, the babies will likely remain healthy. But it may place unnecessary risks on Adrian. I recommend delivering the twins a little earlier. After that, we'll focus on helping both the babies and Adrian recover. Before I could say anything, Adrian shook his head. No. I don't want to take even the smallest risk with them. The doctor patiently explained everything again. After we returned home, I sat beside Adrian for a long time. Taking both of his hands into mine, I looked into his eyes. The babies are important. So important. But so are you. You've already sacrificed so much for them. I'm not willing to lose you because you're trying to protect them. Our sons need their papa. I smiled softly. And I need you too. For a long time, Adrian remained silent. Finally, he rested his forehead against mine. All right. I trust you. Those 3 words meant everything. The day of the delivery arrived sooner than either of us expected. Standing outside the operating room, I had never felt so helpless. When they finally allowed me inside, I saw Adrian lying on the operating table. His face was pale. He looked exhausted. I gently squeezed his hand. You'll be all right? He smiled weakly. So will our boys. As the procedure began, I closed my eyes. I prayed harder than I ever had in my life. Not for wealth. Not for success. Not even for Ashtec. I prayed for my family. Please, let my sons be healthy. But more than anything, please let Adrian come back to me safely. Minutes later, the room was filled with the loud cries of 2 newborn boys. They're healthy, one of the nurses announced happily. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Our sons. They were finally here. But I couldn't celebrate. Not yet. My eyes never left Adrian. Only after the doctor smiled and said, "He's all right. Everything went well." Did I finally allow myself to cry? The 4 of us remained in the hospital for 10 more days. The twins grew stronger every day. And slowly, so did Adrian. By the time we returned home, our apartment finally felt complete. The boys were surprisingly calm babies. They rarely cried without reason and slept well most nights. Exactly 45 days later, we returned for another checkup. The doctor smiled after finishing Adrian's examination. I rarely see recoveries this smooth. He looked at me. You've taken excellent care of all 3 of them. I simply smiled. Beside me, Adrian looked at me with unmistakable pride. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. Both boys had finally fallen asleep after their evening feeding. I was sitting on the bed with one of our sons peacefully sleeping in my arms, while Adrian gently nursed his brother beside me. Looking at the 3 people I loved most, I couldn't stop smiling. So, I said softly, our family is finally complete. Adrian looked at our sons for a long moment before a small smile appeared on his lips. I highly doubt that. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He glanced at me before looking back at the babies. I think I'd still like a little girl someday. I laughed. No, you don't. He frowned playfully. And why not? Have you already forgotten the last month of your pregnancy? You cried almost every night because your back hurt. You could barely sleep. I'm not putting you through that again. Adrian smiled. I'm not saying right now. Let these 2 grow up first. Then, we can think about it. I shook my head. No. Your health comes first. I'm not risking you. For the first time, Adrian didn't argue. He simply looked at me quietly. Several moments later, after making sure both boys were sound asleep, he carefully handed them to the housekeeper, who carried them to the nursery. When the bedroom door closed again, Adrian turned around. He walked back toward me with a smile I knew all too well. Without saying a word, he climbed onto the bed and settled onto my lap, wrapping his arms around my neck. So? He whispered with a teasing smile. You really don't want another baby? I smiled back, gently brushing a strand of hair behind his ear. I don't want to see you suffer again. His expression softened. And what if I said I'd do it all over again, because it'd be with you? For a moment, I simply looked into his eyes. Then I laughed quietly. How am I supposed to say no when you look at me like that? Adrian smiled before leaning forward. Our lips met in a slow, gentle kiss. One kiss became another. Time seemed to disappear as we remained wrapped in each other's arms, sharing the quiet happiness of the family we had built together. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested against each other. I love you, I whispered. I love you too, Adrian replied. That night? After months of fear, secrets, and uncertainty, there were no more walls between us. Only love. As the lights in the bedroom faded and the rest of the apartment fell silent, we held each other close, celebrating not just the birth of our sons, but the beginning of the life we had always been meant to share.